Hi, and welcome to Life After Divorce podcast. And I'm your host, Patricia Leving, and I'm a separation and divorce coach. I'm so happy you're here to join us today. Our topic is parental alienation. I feel it's important for our listeners to have an opportunity to get to hear real life stories, actual experiences that people go through when they're faced with an alienation parent. I'm also really excited to invite Wendy as our guest today. So welcome, Wendy.
Thank you.
So I'd like to start off by saying that I'm a child of divorced parents, and my father actually was prevented me from seeing my mother when I was very young. So Wendy, what is it? What's your description on parental alienation?
Parental alienation is when two people are going through a high conflict divorce and they bring their children into their problems and actually use them as a pawn. Um, uh, we have an alienating parent who will brainwash a child into believing the other parent is bad or doesn't want anything to do with them. They create false memories in their mind, and that leaves the other parent, which is classified as the target parent, bewildered and not really knowing how to change the situation. So it is extremely important with early detection nowadays in order to wing out and to get rid of parental alienation as fast as possible.
So how did you discover that you were becoming an alienated from your child?
Well, one day she got extremely angry with me. I can't even remember what it was about now because most of the stuff was extremely trivial, but it gets escalated so much just because of her behavior. So she ended up letting it slip one day that her dad was telling her that I wanted an abortion with her, that I didn't love her. He would be actually, after we went to court, he would be actually leaving the court papers out on the table and say, come here, child, come and look at this. This is what your mother's doing to me. So with all this brainwashing, it ended up distorting her behavior extremely bad. So she became very abusive and violent towards me because she has false memories that I was abusing her, that I didn't like her, and that she wasn't loved. And that, as a parent, is heartbreaking to watch your child go through. And when you're separated for such a degree from your child, it's like grieving a living death. You're grieving that child that you can no longer see, you can no longer touch, you can no longer feel, you can no longer talk to, but they're still very much alive, and you just can't be with them.
Yeah, that must be the hardest thing to have to deal with, knowing that the child is out there and that you can't, reach out to them and have a life with them. That's just an awful thing. And again, I know that feeling because I've been through that, not, knowing that my mother was close by, but I could never see her. So as a child, I'm feeling the same thing as what the parent felt. And parents go through it too, right? The adults. But I know there's different types of circumstances that there's one, like parents alone, some of them will still allow the kids to see the other parent, but then sometimes they say hurtful things about that parent, and that causes child to become alienated from that other parent. I know there's also other things where I heard where parents keep the anger in so badly that, and because of the divorce and the situations that they went through, that then the kids get involved with the disputes and they're in the middle of the arguments with the parents, and then the kids get so confused and then they act out towards the other parent. So that's another circumstance that I've noticed from, dealing with my own clients and stuff like that when they're going through a divorce. And then the other thing I also see, if the parents having insecurities and then they resent the other parent for moving on with their life, having a relationship, finding another partner and so forth, then they bring the kids in and they have to side with them and they want to destroy the other relationship. So they use the kids as pawns. And I don't know if you've ever heard of these circumstances, but what do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, there's 3 degrees of parental alienation. One is moderate, then there's mild, and there's severe. The mild is, and Alienation can be completely unconscious as well, which a lot of people don't think. They think that it's an attack from the person who's the alienating party, but sometimes it can be very unconscious and they don't realize they're doing it. Like, for example, if you're a mother who's alienating the father and you're on the phone to your own parent and saying something mean about your ex-spouse, you never know where your kid is. And trust me, your children are always listening. They catch everything. So that's an unconscious bias and an unconscious way of being alienated. That you don't realize that your child is listening, but you're putting down their parent with them close by. So there's also several degrees. Like the most severe degree is when you have your child who has such outrageous behavior and is violent in that to you. And moderate is right in between. So it's not quite as bad, but it's still not good. So it's all a matter of if you could catch it when it's at the moderate degree and when your children are young enough, and its early detection is a key factor in making sure that your children are not alienated. And of course, on my website, you can find a lot of parental assessments, which will also help you wing out to know for sure whether your child is being alienated or not. There's also, as well as going with uh, being a completely alienated parent, we have a hostile aggressive parenting as well, which is also a form of alienation, but it's more the alienating behaviors. And there's also the severest form of alienation is when a child has actually displayed all the symptoms of parental alienation syndrome. So these are, and it's also classified as a severe form of child abuse, which has been recognized by many psychologists worldwide.
Well, that's really great information that you're sharing, because I do agree with that as well. I think during a separation, divorce, and when children have to go through these emotions, becomes very difficult. And if you don't take time to work on it right away, it actually gets out of hand and out of control. It gets to a point you can't, the help that you need is going to be huge amount of therapy or some sort of counseling, or, in order for them to even just work through those things.
Right. It's reunification therapy that we want to enforce because any child who's been alienated, this isn't just, well, when they become an adult, things will get better. Once they're alienated and it's severe and prolonged, it will last them and they will carry it through the rest of their lives.
So why did your ex-husband alienate your child, like, for them not to see you?
He was angry with me because I allowed him to leave. He ended up having an affair, and I was asking him to co-parent and hoping that he would help me out. I would give him my car and still, even when we were separated, but he became mad at the fact that I was asking him to co-parent because that was kind of cutting into his life with his new girlfriend. So as retaliation against me, he ended up turning my daughter against me completely.
Yeah, that's very, very unfortunate.
And it's unfortunately, it's false memories that have been implanted inside her brain that she doesn't know the difference because she believes that everything that he's told her is true, although it's not even close to being true.
So how long was the gap that you weren't seeing your daughter? Like, how long was that gap?
She moved in. We did reunify for maybe a year or so. She moved in with me, but the alienation started at 12. She's now 23. So we went probably at least 5 years without seeing each other. And when we do see each other, it's not a healthy relationship at all.
What do you think that you need to do in order to make it a healthy relationship? Is there a way that you can work through those things if you went through counseling, or if you got a coach or some sort of support out there?
I've asked her many, many times to go for counseling, but because she doesn't actually believe that there's a problem or that she's able to acknowledge that she has been alienated, she's not willing to go for any counseling, any help at all. Like, I've had her in a counselor's office at one time before we even got in to get see the counselor. I've had her in treatment home after treatment home after treatment home. Every time I take her to a treatment home, they force me to take her back. So this has gone on for the last 11 years. And now that she's of age, I cannot force her to go for treatment. She has to be willing and wanting to do it herself.
Mhm. When I was a child, and I understand that when my father stopped me from seeing my mother, it's a horrible thing. I remember sitting there on the couch, and my mother was trying to reach out to us, and my father was angry with her and yelling on the phone, saying that you're not going to see your child. And the way I was feeling is I was afraid. I was afraid to see her. Not that I didn't want to see her. I was afraid to see her because I kept having all these negative thoughts and all these negative feelings and these, conversations that my father had, that she was such a horrible person. So I would think that, and I didn't know how to deal with it as a young child. Later
That's
on,
one of the effects for sure. And not only with that as well, but the fact is most kids that are living with the alienated parent wants to do everything they can to please that parent as well.
yeah, and that's normal for them. They're not doing it intentionally to go against the other parent. They just don't know any different. They don't.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
it's a survival thing, right? It's a way of them for surviving because they think they only know about the information of the parent that they're with, not the information of the parent that they're not with, or what type of
that's right.
person, or even what type of person they really are. I
Yeah,
was fortunate to meet my mother at the age of 16, that I took it upon myself to go meet her. I got to know her. She was a very nice person. Did I have a mother-daughter relationship? No, but I was luckily enough that we worked out a relationship. But I unfortunately only got to meet her for about 12, 13 years, and then she passed away. But that was cheated on me. That was cheated for my life because I never get to have that parent in my life for as much as I could. I only was very limited time. So I felt that was very unfair to my father to do that. As an adult, I realized that. As a child,
yeah,
I didn't. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's what happened as well to my oldest. She actually developed an estrangement between her and her father because of the alienation. And my oldest doesn't have any drug issues. She doesn't smoke, drink, like she has 3 college degrees, so it became very stressful on her. Now that her sister had a child, unfortunately, the alienation as a grandparent even became more phenomenal than I experienced as a parent. Because as a parent, I was only dealing with my ex-husband and my child's behavior. But when I became a grandmother, all these other elements added into it.
So Wendy, when you were going through your divorce, what was that experience with for your daughter? Going through the process and having your spouse making decisions based on your relationship and so forth.
Well, when I start going through it, my daughter was 12 years old. Now she's 23. She has the mentality of a 12-year-old still. What happens is one parent becomes an alienator. And what they do is they systematically brainwash a child into believing that their parent is bad or that they don't want nothing to do with them. In my case, it was my child was told that that I wanted to have an abortion with her. And when you do it once, normally a child will forget about these things, but when you do it over and over and over, it tends to start to brainwash a child. A child is creating false memories from things that she thinks that had happened, although that there was no fact basis towards them at all. So I saw the behavior with her completely escalate. I've had her in treatment homes and trying to get her all the professional help I could, and it kept failing me. And I couldn't understand why when I was following all the recommendations until one day we had a very serious argument and she had said to me, well, Dad told me this, Dad told me that. That was when I started discovering what parental alienation was. I didn't have a clue beforehand. and I wanted to try and co-parent with him because our children were created out of the love that we had for each other at the time. So when we got divorced, I didn't feel like my kids should have to suffer by being stuck between us. We should have still created the same loves and the same boundaries that we had while we were going through the divorce.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that because I used to teach courses with cooperative parenting and divorce, it was called. And I used to hear the stories of other parents and how that's all they wanted to do was see their children and create a relationship, with each other and just basically, have that co-parenting style. And there's the kids shouldn't be taken away from either parent. And that's where when you're going through a separation divorce, that they need to learn that it's okay. You can go through it, but you can also build a base and a foundation of two homes that are separated, but still have a relationship with each child. So what was your impact as an adult? Like, what do you go through?
Well, as an alienated parent, there is many stages that you need to get through in order to get to the end result. You go through first, it's nothing but sadness, you cry all the time, and then once the tears dry up, you become angry, and then you become emotional. And I acted out when I first went through my divorce and when this was happening. And it didn't take long to get myself back together because I had kids to think about. I couldn't be unruly because I was the one that was raising them. I was the one that was supporting them. So I had to be fully there and fully present for them. So I did start to get help, treatment, but there's so many emotions and everybody's grieving process is so different. And some can get over it pretty quickly, and then others take a longer time to get over it. So it's all up to the individual and how the individual is able to cope and the plans that they are able to find for themselves in order to overcome the trauma that they've been through.
Yeah, I know that. I know that feeling in hearing that. When I have clients, I always feel that the parents have to get their whole life situation in order. They have to go through the divorce by dealing with all of the assets, the emotions, the complications that they're dealing with, and not get the children involved. Because when they do that, they can't get their own life in order. And there are all kinds of emotions that you go through. There is the grieving, there is the anger, there is all that. And you don't want to throw that on your children. So it's so important when you're at the very beginning stage is to work through your separation and divorce. Do you feel that you had to do that as well? Did you work through?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really so important for equal shared parenting, for co-parenting. It's so important for parents to remember that they created that child out of love. Why does the love for the child die? Because their marriage died. The child shouldn't be brought into that. The child has to be a child and grow naturally. By forcing a child to grow up way too fast really messes with their mind. It's a proven fact that a child's mind is not fully developed till the age of 25 years old. So with trying to manipulate it at such a young age, it turns it into a sponge. And of course, if they get into drug problems, then it actually inhibits their ability for their brain to function and become older than what it is. So their brain actually gets stunted and they end up staying that age mentally.
Yeah, I agree. And my famous words was, it's not the kids that asked for the divorce, it was the parents. So the children should,
Absolutely.
yeah, and the children should
Absolutely.
have to have impact on that. The adults need to take responsibility and
Yeah.
yeah, make their lives happy. Children should be children. And there can be two homes. It can work. They can do it. There is success when you do it right. And if you take the right steps, divorce can be easier than what people expect, but they go through all these trauma things and they don't want to fix it. So if they have to fix it, it's better. Did your daughter get any sort of support or help at all that she can deal with this sort of situation?
She was not forthcoming to help. She ended up spiraling out of control with drugs and abusive behavior and being a delinquent. And she is just incapable right now of getting help. And unfortunately, if they don't want the help, you can't get the help. You have to work on yourself in order to be able to provide stability for them for when they're able to come back and they want that relationship with you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like when, as a child myself, with having my parents separating myself with being a very young age, I had to work through all of that, and I had to get through those anger moments of what my father did to me. Never mind, not having to see my mother, but the being angry that my father prevented me from seeing her. So, as a child of divorce, I know what that feels like. And then as an adult of divorce, you have to stop and think like, it's unfair and everything that happened, but I also have to learn how to forgive and work through all of that too. Forgive my
That's
father
right.
for what he did, not to say what he did was right, but forgive him so that I can accept the fact to see the other parent, right?
That's right. That's right. And we don't realize it at the time when we're going through it, how it's going to affect us, not only as children, but for the rest of our lives. It doesn't go away when you become an adult. You end up becoming alienated from your own children, right? So it's a generational pattern that if you don't get the help and early prevention and early detection is really the key. If you can catch it as early as possible, then you're going to have a way of preventing it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. What are you doing for yourself?
I do a lot of advocating, and I'm a huge advocate for family rights and run several groups. And that's actually how I keep my sanity, because I listen to everybody else's story and I have to be strong for them. The most important thing that everybody needs to remember is these problems are temporary. Your child is going to become of age one day, and if they're not too badly brainwashed, they will come back.
Mhm.
And you want to be alive and you want to be in your best form that you can possibly be in order to welcome your kids back with open arms and be able to get them on the right track. We don't know what our kids are feeling, and they're feeling it twice as bad than we are.
Yeah, I
They
totally agree. And that's
don't
why.
know how to deal with it where we do, right?
Well, that's not absolutely 100% because I know, like, even though we think we know how to deal with it, there's a lot of adults out there that go through separation divorce and they're dealing with a lot of anxiety. They're going through a lot of problems themselves, and a lot of it's through the separation divorce. And they're
Yeah.
not, yeah, and a lot of them act out. Um, and use the kids as pawns, as I call it, because they are so angry and dealing with their own emotions about the divorce themselves. Like they're insecure, they're hurt, they're angry. The other partner might have had an affair, or they, whatever the circumstances are. So what they do, unfortunately, is they sort of latch out to the child for some support, which they shouldn't, because through a separation divorce, you should not use your children as a support system. You should get help individually. And that's why I have a program as well that I do out there, which is relating to separation and divorce. Because if you're right, as you said earlier, if somebody doesn't go out and get help right away, or go through the process of separation divorce, or build a business relationship with the other person, or build the actual co-parenting style, then they're only just not helping each other. They're just battling these emotions and battling these problems, and they just escalate, which is unfortunate because then everybody gets hurt. Where if you just take on the action and get out there and start, let's put this plan together. Divorce doesn't have to be difficult. Divorce doesn't have to be angry or engaging to these things. We're mature people. We have to figure out why the divorce ended in the first place. And as much as it could be one person doing the wrong thing at the time of what that person says, there's two people that were in that relationship. And it's caused by two people just drifting apart or whatever the circumstances is. But you can't be using your emotions and anger and resentment to the other person or the children involved, which is just so unfortunate. And what do
Yeah.
they do? One of the
Yeah.
actions is parental alienation, which is,
And unfortunately, kids have been alienated from their parents. Some have been many years, some few months. There's different levels of alienation as well, right? So there's mild and moderate and severe form of alienation. And, the mildest kids are the ones that are easiest to work with because there is hope. They're willing to change. They're willing to get help. But the ones that are the severest alienated, they don't realize that they're alienated. And that's what makes our job as parents and loving them so difficult, because they aren't capable of loving back. And it's not that they're doing it as a projection because they actually hate their parents, but this is a reflection of how they feel about themselves, and parents take it personally, but it's not them, it's their child. It just doesn't know the right direction to take, and they don't have anybody there who's a sound mind, who's willing to show them the direction and how to bring love back into their life, right?
I totally agree. And children should be children. They should, be raised in that environment of playing games and learning and, growing and all of that. And that shouldn't change just because you have a divorce. That should not change for the children.
And the home was created out of love. Love needs to be provided even after the divorce, because the kids, like, they get into drugs and all the problems they get into, and then they become very abusive. And then when they have children, it's just a generational pattern that just will escalate on and on and on. And there's no hope for them, and there's no help. And it's like grieving a live death. And that's what way we look at it, right? Because you're constantly grieving a death for a child that's still alive, but you're not allowed to have any contact with them.
Well, it's funny you say that, Wendy, because you know what, as the opposite parent, someone like similar to yourself, I mean, you're fortunate you have the skills to cope with it, but their parents on the opposite side, which is alienated from the children, do have all those symptoms. They do go grieving. They are going through difficulties. They can't sleep at night. They're having all these emotions, and they're really having a hard time dealing with it. And
Yeah.
it's luckily that there are some programs out there to help them, but it's not easy for that adult as a parent, being away from their kids, and they don't want to be. They want to be a part of their lives. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that the other parent is being so angry and so, disruptive to this whole system, and not engage in having to fix it and to make it better. What was your
Yeah.
experience like when you went through the divorce with your daughter, having your spouse there, like during the court session or anything like that? Could you tell us your experience there?
Well, he was actually, when I was going through a divorce, the judge actually called me a computer widow, because that was how our divorce escalated and got up to that point, because he became very in tune to the computer and video games, and actually checked out of the marriage long before we were even divorced. And one of my children, who is not alienated, who's very close, who her and I are very close, has the estrangement towards him because of the behavior.
Mhm.
So it not only affects parents, but it affects all these entities. And there's so many components to it, because really anybody can be an alienator. And it's all about awareness and knowing how to protect yourself. Because in the high rate of divorce today, guaranteed at least half are going to be alienated before their divorce is final. And I always say, for anybody that is getting out of a relationship and who's going through a divorce, that you cannot fully move on with another relationship until at least well after a year. And you have to make sure that you have no anger left in your heart for that ex. Because if you do, all you're doing is carrying your old emotions onto the next relationship. And that's not going to do the relationship any good. And that's going to be another relationship that's doomed and regarded for failure, right? And then the children are going to be right back into the same position, but with a new partner and a new parent, right?
I totally agree. I totally agree. It's very important to be out there and getting help and doing it the right way is best for
Yeah.
everybody. And
And there's so many stages of grief. And it really upsets me when somebody sits there and says, oh, you grieved enough. You grieved enough. Time to move on. It's like, how is anybody able to put a time limit on somebody else's grief? We all grieve in a different way, just like a divorce. You have to get through all these stages of grief before you can actually move on with a healthy mindset, right? And it's just like the kids are going through it too. We have to navigate not only for ourselves, but we have to navigate our kids through the system as well with us.
Yes, because the kids become the adults eventually.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they're still dealing with all that emotion and they never went through it, or they never had that happy home, and they're always blaming themselves or thinking, is it my fault? Is it, did I do something to contribute to this? And they didn't. It's not the
yeah,
children that asked for the divorce, it's the parents. And it's
yeah.
the parents that,
And the kids are great at blaming themselves for everything.
mhm,
Everything that happens, the kids believe it's their fault.
mhm.
And their schoolwork is going to suffer. And if you want your kids to make something of yourself, alienating them against the other parent isn't going to help.
No. And the fact is, one of the, again, the behavior of the parent that's alienating the children from the other parent is needing to deal with all of that. And they're having to, they have to understand the importance of their own behavior, of what's the impact. And they don't. They just continue to live off of the revenge, the I'm going to get that other person back for what they did. And they can't forgive them. They can't move on, and they just want to just continually do anything to destroy their feelings.
Well, the number one personality disorder that is found in alienating parents is narcissistic borderline personality disorder. And this is a projection of everything. There's so many different components to parental alienation, like gaslighting, which is the act of trying to make somebody else think that they're crazy. Being a narcissist means that you're not able to take any responsibility for your own actions and actually project your actions onto another person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's one of the number one, that and borderline personality are the two main mental disorders that are associated with alienating parents.
So from your experience, is there anything more that you want to add or offer to parents out there or to children out there? Let's start with parents. What would you offer as your, from your experience and everything you've went through? What's the
Um,
top three things that you would sort of offer as a, as what to do in order to get through it?
to remember that one, parents need to remember that if you think your child's in another room, they're always listening. Always listening. So never speak about your ex-partner around your child or say one negative bad word about them at all. Children don't need to hear that about their other parent. It's so important to co-parent, which is going to save your children a lot of grief, because remembering that they were created out of love, that they are still loved. Just because there was a breakdown in the marriage doesn't mean there has to be a breakdown with your children.
Yeah.
And the third thing is you need to get rid of the anger, you need to get rid of the hate, and you need to come together for the best solution. And the best solution is 50-50 equal parenting right across the board. So everybody has a say in what's going on in that child's life. They should not feel neglected by either parent. They should not, it's not natural for a child to hate a parent. No matter the circumstances that they grew up in, regardless if a child was abused or whatever, they are not naturally prone to to hate a parent. So if a child hates a parent, there's something more serious going on.
Mhm. So do you agree where I feel that if the parents take responsibility at the beginning stage of their separation and divorce, they probably, you know, and if they act out as adults and take, you know, the steps that need to be required, they probably wouldn't even deal with the alienation. They would really understand it, and they would allow the children to just, you know, work together with the other parent.
Well, absolutely, and that's the key component is making sure that we catch it early enough in order to be able to detect it. Make sure you co-parent and remember to love your children more
Mhm.
than you hate your spouse. Get rid of all the anger and remember your kids are always listening. So it's so important to put them first and to co-parent as equals. Remember that you created that child out of love. So just because you have no more love for your ex-spouse, it doesn't mean that your love for your child dies.
Yeah, I totally agree. Do you know of anything that's like, is there any alienation laws out there, or is there any sort of legal system that you're aware of?
Well, we are still in the process of fighting to get equal parenting. It's starting to be picked up at in most cities and provinces and states worldwide. I deal with people all over the world. Um, we actually went and got a second reading done for grandparents' rights in '99. But it seems to be needing some more work done to it. It's not as good as it should be, and if we can get rid of the educated judges and the court system and the family court system as well, then we could get rid of alienation altogether, which is also a big contributing factor to the alienation because of not having the equal parenting.
Well, I think that what you're doing is really great, Wendy, because I think, just alienation alone is just a really horrible thing for children to deal with. But there's also the adult side that, as we mentioned earlier about the symptoms of what they do, but the adults themselves having to deal with alienation is not easy. I mean, they're going through their emotions, they're dealing with all of that. And so there's the child sides that they're dealing with, but there's also the parent that's taken away their child. I couldn't even imagine not being able to see my children. I could not imagine that life at all. I have two children of my own and I've raised them on my own, and I just can't imagine not ever having to see them. And that alone, and with an adult having to deal with that, is they go through the emotions. They're insecure. They're, having all kinds of mixed feelings. I'm sure you've even experienced that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I had to experience it. And that's what I tell everybody. Some people are, oh, I don't want to cry around people today. I'm just like, if you need to cry, you cry. Because you know what? The only way you're going to ever feel better is to let all the emotions out and make sure you're cleansed. And it's going to creep up on you. You're going to have triggers. And there's so many emotional factors that you need to get through in order to get to the end result. And one thing I found that has really helped me is I'm in the middle of writing a book. So journaling has helped me. Being an advocate for family rights, this has helped me. But I didn't always do this work. I had to go through the stages of grieving because I couldn't help anybody else if I can't help myself. If
Right.
I'm a mess, I can't help anybody else. So I had to make sure that I was stable enough to be able to be that force that people need. And, when I was going through this, I always promised to be that one best friend that everybody needed.
Mhm.
And today I still hold that true because everybody needs that one best friend. They need somebody that they can just vent to. And people will sit there and say, oh, they don't want to listen to me anymore. They're tired of listening to me. I will always be there to listen. I don't care if you said the same thing to me a million times, but I'm always going to be there to listen. And then these are the things that people think it's just alienation. It's inside the family. But no, it's not. It escalates to such bigger problems.
Yeah, I completely understand. So what advice would you offer to parents going through, divorce or going through this type of situation? Is there anything that you can offer in your experience with alienation? What are the three top?
My biggest thing would be to come together and co-parent. No family, the way I look at it, is no family deserves to be in court. No family should have to go to court. If you can mediate with the other parent, that's going to save you a ton of money. And it's also going to be a lot quicker than going through the court process. And equal parenting, shared parenting, 50-50 across the board. Everybody gets to say, and to love your children more than you dislike each other. Because eventually your feelings for each other are going to go away, and you could end up being civil with each other. And there's no sense of getting your children into a crossfire of something that may be so temporary,
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely.
especially with kids because their effects are lifelong for them.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I've worked through it myself as an adult, but yes, it had took me a while to get through it. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Okay, so well, thank you very much again, Wendy, for participating, and I want to thank the listeners for joining us. I would suggest that we keep checking the website for new topics on real life stories and experiences relating to separation, divorce, or anything other tools that can associate to that. And again, always remember there is a life after divorce.